When George Lucas was writing the first Star Wars movie, he envisioned the final battle as a two-part affair. A big battle in space and a simultaneous battle on the ground between the Empire and a primitive race of aliens known as Wookiees. But during production, it became clear to Lucas that this grand multi-elevation battle wouldn't be possible, so it got reworked to only be a space battle, and the Wookiees were scrapped. But Lucas liked the Wookiees way too much and wanted them in his film, so he had to adapt them to match the new changes. Instead of an entire group of Wookiees, there would only be one, and he would be the companion of Han Solo that helped fly the Millennium Falcon. As you probably guessed by now, this is the creation of Chewbacca. The primitive race Lucas originally envisioned became the technologically inclined co-pilot of the Millennium Falcon. Flash forward 2 movies, and now Lucas finally has the means to do the ground and space battle that he wanted to do from the start. But now, thanks to Chewbacca, Wookiees have been set up as not primitive. So, for the sake of simplicity, it was decided that a new race would have to be created. Since Wookiees were originally created to be the primitive race, it made sense to Lucas to not stray too far from his original idea. What he came up with were Ewoks. Now, the commonly stated origin for the Ewoks, mostly said by angry fans, is that Lucas didn't have enough money to make a bunch of Wookiees, so they had to be dumbed down for budget reasons. But this is obviously false.
The people in this crowd will soon be among almost 40,000 who have seen a new science fiction movie at North Park Cinema 2. The movie is called Star Wars, and since it opened here 9 days ago, capacity crowds have filled the 1,100 seats in the theater almost daily. In only 9 days, Star Wars has grossed more money than any movie in Dallas history.
By this time, Star Wars was already a multi-million-dollar series, with the first movie making well over $700 million and Empire making over $400 million. Adding them together totals $1.1 billion. Ewoks were made because of a creative decision, not a budgetary one. And we got the Wookiee battle we wanted anyway in the prequels. Wikipedia also has a different origin for the Ewoks that's pretty close to the one I said, but still has some inaccuracies. George Lucas himself has talked about why he made Ewoks, and the description that he gave, that I found from this Leonard Maltin interview, is the same one that I just told you. Just like with Killer Clowns, I do my research when I make these videos. I'm not like some of the other YouTubers who are just going to read one Wikipedia article, copy it down, and then read it back in a generic narrator voice. You know who you are. Another plane. Big day for air travel. I make these videos to properly educate myself and all of you about things that I am passionate about. What I'm getting at is I only find credible sources when I make these videos. It's important to me to not misinform you guys, so I take a lot of care while researching. Now let's get back on topic. I think a lot of the animosity towards Ewoks has dissolved in recent times, but there are still a lot of people who are irrationally salty about them, and I think I know why.
Ultimately, Ewoks split Star Wars fandom into 2 camps, those born before and those born after May 25th, 1973. The Ewok line. Anyone born on this side of the Ewok line was at least 10 years old when Jedi came out, and thus too old for something so cloying and cute.
Ewoks are cool little dudes, and Star Wars fans have a lot more to worry about than Wicket. Today's lore breakdown is all about these vicious alien teddy bears. Stick around.
Point that thing someplace else.
I should probably start with a disclaimer. Because Star Wars is such a rich franchise with hundreds of different outlets across multiple mediums, it would be very difficult for me to cover everything that we have ever been told about Ewoks. Between comics, novels, TV shows, video games, it would get really messy really fast. So for simplicity, I'm only going to cover Return of the Jedi and other information I found on StarWars.com. This means I won't go over anything from the comics or that obscure cartoon from 1985. The reason I'm only looking at Return of the Jedi is because when Disney bought Lucasfilm, they made a lot of the spin-off material like comics and games non-canon. And I really only want to stick to canon information for this series, which is also why I'm using StarWars.com as a source. As the official website controlled by Disney for Star Wars content, anything on there is going to be canon according to Disney, who, like it or not, own and control the Star Wars brand. I'll do my best to make this video as complete a breakdown as I can with the limited info source, so let's begin. Ewoks are a bipedal race of aliens that live on the forest moon of Endor. They are covered in a thick layer of short fur that, makes them look like teddy bears. What also gives them a teddy bear appearance is their height. On average, only standing about 1 meter tall or just under 3 foot 3 inches. This small size lets them sneak around the forest with ease to set up traps and catch food. It's worth pointing out that they seem to have no problem eating humans, which makes them a tad scary if you're not their friend. Which is exactly what happened to Han, Luke, Chewie, and R2 after they unfortunately stepped into one of the Ewoks' traps. If the Ewoks didn't think 3PO was a god, then there is a good chance that they would have been eaten. which really would have made for a disappointing end to the original trilogy. The Ewoks live in a tribe society. The definition of a tribe is a social division in a traditional society consisting of families or communities linked by social, economic, religious, or blood ties, with a common culture and dialect typically having a recognized leader. This almost perfectly describes the Ewoks. They all seem to have the same religious belief, or at least a common belief in deities, because they mistake C-3PO for one. And it seems like they are all part of a giant family, although not literally. The Ewoks' home, the Bright Tree Village, is another piece of evidence that this is a tribe, but the more obvious piece of evidence is that they have a recognized leader in the form of Chief Chirpa. There isn't a lot I found on Chief Chirpa, but he does have his own page on StarWars.com, even though it's a bit brief. It does, however, definitively confirm that this is a tribe, and so does this line from Return of the Jedi, so I'm not quite sure what argument I'm making here.
We are now a part of the tribe.
There is a lot more about Chief Chirp on the Wookiees, but that comes from material that is no longer canon, so unfortunately I can't use that for this video because it doesn't fit the rules of the series. However, Chief Chirpa is a pretty cool character if you want to read up on him, and maybe I will do a non-canon lore breakdown on the Ewoks if that is something that you guys want to see. By the way, there's a great website called StarWarsCanonTimeline.com that was a big help while researching. Now let's talk about the Bright Tree Village I mentioned earlier. The Bright Tree Village is the home and shelter of the Ewoks. The village is made up of a series of rope bridges and tree houses all interconnected with each other and is honestly the coolest treehouse base I've ever seen, and yes, that includes Finn and Jake's tree fort. This village is a massive accomplishment for a species no bigger than my dog and who only have crude tools made of stone. The village is very visually striking, and so are the Ewoks themselves. The Ewoks all dress somewhat differently, and like us humans have a variety of looks that all stem from a common theme, a hooded poncho type of dress made from a fabric or type of hide. They come in different colors and shapes and are adorned with different types of jewelry like teeth, bone beads, and feathers. These different hoods and trinkets help differentiate between different members of the tribe as well as just make them look cooler. Not just their clothing is different from one another though, as the Ewoks themselves are all pretty unique. Between their facial structure and fur color, all Ewoks are more or less distinguishable from each other, which is a nice detail when they easily could have made all Ewoks look the same. I mentioned their crude tools earlier, so why don't we take a look at some of the other tools and weapons they use. The primary weapons the Ewoks use are spears. This bow and arrow made very simply with just a stick and a string. Bludgeoning sticks used for, well, bludgeoning. On the more impressive side of things though, they engineered a catapult and even figured out how to fly with this very sketchy looking glider. They also have a scythe made of what I think is bone. Probably the most basic weapon they use is just a bag of rocks. You can throw them, drop them from the tops of trees, or do what this Ewok did and fly over your enemy while raining them down. They also use axes made of stone and lassos for wrangling up food, and also the occasional speeder bike. I did mention their penchant for traps earlier, so I thought it would be fun to rapid fire all of the traps that we see in Return of the Jedi. First is a trap that lures you in with bait, then ensnares you in a big net. This trap is irresistible to Wookiees. Moving on, we got the classic tripwire they use for tripping an ATST and clotheslining the scout trooper. There's a sort of two-log pendulum that crushes an ATST between them, and finally a log slide that makes another ATST slip. Man, rough day for ATSTs. On to the non-murdery devices they have. Ewoks are quite musically inclined. Horns also have a big role. They are used as musical instruments, battle calls, and even letting people know when to gather. A very versatile tool. Interestingly enough, some of the Ewoks are tobacco enjoyers. We can see one of them smoking a pipe while 3PO is telling them the story of the last two movies. Now, it is not clear what's in the pipe, but tobacco is typically what we humans use, so let's just assume there's some alien plant equivalent to tobacco, and that's what this guy is smoking. Moving on from the weapons and tools, let's get a bit more acquainted with the individual members of the tribe. Obviously, there's Chief Chirpa, I mentioned him a few times already, and the face of the Ewoks, Wicket W. Warwick. Wicket is the first Ewok we ever meet, and is what most of the toys are based on. Wicket is a bit shorter than the average Ewok, standing at 0.8 meters. Chirpa, on the other hand, is the leader of the Ewok tribe, and is exactly 1 meter tall. Logray is the tribe shaman, and is the one we see tell 3PO his friends are going to be eaten in his honor. Logray wears a skull of an animal that has a bird-like appearance, and his staff is decorated with bones and feathers. The Ewok scout we saw when Luke, Han, Chewie, R2, and 3PO were captured is Tebow. Honestly, he's the creepiest looking Ewok, and he's weirdly tall, coming in at 1.3 meters. Now, Pop Blue might be my favorite. He has the coolest attire and the most menacing stick. But also, he stole an Imperial speeder bike, causing the distraction that allowed Han and the rebels to infiltrate the Imperial base. Keep in mind, Ewoks do not have any technology on their planet normally, so that means Pop Blue figured out how to operate the speeder bike on the spot, which is pretty amazing. That, or he just observed how the scout troopers were operating them, but either way, he really came through. Also, Papu is friends with Wicket and Teebo. Cool. And that's all of the Ewoks we know by name in the new canon. It's a short list, but what are you gonna do? Disney chose to purge all of the spin-off work pre-Lucasfilm purchase, which is also going to greatly affect this next part of the video. Sometime in the year 4 ABY, the Empire established a base on the forest moon of Endor. They ignored the native life there, not seeing them as much of a threat, and built what would function as a power generator for the energy shield around the second Death Star. Sometime later, Han, Luke, Leia, Chewie, R2-D2, C-3PO, and 7 other rebel troops would be sent to the forest moon of Endor to seize this base and shut off the shield so that an attack could be made on Death Star 2. Here is where we meet the Ewoks for the first time. After a scuffle with some scout troopers on speeder bikes, Leia got shot off her bike and gets knocked unconscious. A very frightened Wicket finds her and wakes her up, but warms up to the princess after she gives him some food. After they hear something in the woods, Wicket takes Leia to the Bright Tree Village. I'm guessing that Wicket found Leia while he was out with the hunting party led by Teebo and broke off from the group in order to investigate her. I'm not 100% sure, but it makes the most sense to me. At around the same time of Wicket finding Leia, Han, Luke, Chewie, and the droids go out looking for her, but end up in a big net courtesy of the Ewoks and some bait that Chewie just couldn't resist.
Great. Always thinking with your stomach.
R2 cuts them down, but they are instantly greeted by Teebo and his hunting party, short one Wicket. After some threatening spear moves and the confiscation of Chewie's crossbow, the Ewoks mistake C-3PO as a god, I think due to his gold color. It's not because he's a sentient machine. They have no problems taking R2 prisoner, and he's also a sentient machine. I think it has to be the gold plating. Anyway, the Ewoks tie Han, Luke, and Chewie to some big sticks with the intention of roasting them over a fire on a very large spit as the main course to
Banquet in my honor.
Thanks to some quick thinking and the Force, 3PO and by extension Luke are able to convince the Ewoks to not eat them and release them from their bonds. Later that night, 3PO tells the Ewoks about the events of the last two movies in a very compelling way. I mean, just look at these guys. They're completely hooked. It's here that the group is inducted into the tribe. This is why I believe the Ewoks help in the fight against the Empire. That, and they are just invaders to their home. The next day, the rebels are trying to come up with an infiltration plan into the power generator. Papu, being the genius he is, takes it upon himself to steal a speeder bike and lure 2 of the 3 guards guarding the base away. With only 1 guard remaining, the rebels easily outnumber him and gain entry. However, this victory is short-lived as our heroes are captured by stormtroopers. And we also learn that Death Star 2's weaponry, which we initially were told wasn't operational, will be very soon. Not only that, but the Empire was aware of the planned attack on Death Star 2 and staged a trap.
It's a trap!
Back on the Force Moon of Endor, Wicket, seeing the incoming danger, leaves to get help from the rest of the tribe, and this is where the Ewoks really show their skill. Beating up a small army of Imperial troops with no less than 4 ATSTs, with nothing but numbers, traps, and of course their assortment of weapons that I should remind you are made of sticks and some rocks. There are some casualties unfortunately, and it's really sad to see. The second Death Star is now operational, so time is of the essence. With some clever GTA by Chewie, and of course the terrifying murder abilities of the Ewoks, the rebels are able to get the upper hand and gain entry once again to the power generator, blowing it up in a gnarly explosion and shutting off the energy shield protecting Death Star 2, allowing Lando and the other rebels in space to destroy Death Star 2 in another gnarly explosion. That same night, a massive celebration is held at Bright Tree Village for the victory and the end of the Empire. Music is played, dancing is done, a nice little wrap up for the Ewok story. And also for this very long video. Hopefully you guys liked it, because this is pretty much what I'm going to be doing from now on. I may tweak the structure a little bit in the future, but lore breakdowns like this is what I'm going to focus on. Please subscribe and like the video, and follow me on TikTok at LifelongFanboy. I'll see you tomorrow.